The following is a paid program, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent the opinions of the management of this station or Pamel Broadcasting.
Good morning. This is 1 in 36, a presentation from Anderson Center for Autism. 1 in 36 is a weekly show devoted to autism spectrum disorder.
Good morning and welcome to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, Chief Development Officer at Anderson Center for Autism. And today I'm speaking with James Bowers, who is a program director with the New York State Sheriff's Association. James, thank you for being on the show. Welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me, Eliza.
I'm very happy to have you. We're going to talk about a topic that comes up frequently in conversations that I have with families, caregivers, other providers, individuals with autism, whether it's here at Anderson or when I'm out doing other things with the general public. It's certainly connected to some of our work through our Anderson Consulting and Training Department, where we do some trainings for first responders. And the reason why this particular topic, which we're going to get into in a second, is so important is because it has so much to do with safety and well-being for really everyone potentially involved in any sort of interaction between a neurodivergent or autistic person and an emergency responder, whether that be police, fire, ambulance, anything. So we're going to get into some really cool stuff today, and you've got some really great programs to talk about. I'm going to start, though, with a request to just have you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you've done leading up to being in this role with the New York State Sheriff's Association.
Well, I attended Siena College and got a degree over there in marketing and management, and I find myself in a position of management, which is appropriate to my degree. So that's exciting for me because I know a lot of people get degrees and they don't do what the degree is. So It's nice to have a job utilizing the skills that I learned in school. So that's about it. I mean, I graduated Siena College. I was a continuing ed student. I graduated in the year 2000. I basically, went out into the job market, worked a few jobs here and there. The last job I had was 10 years working for a storage solutions company.
Okay.
Storage is a big little word in that industry because I found myself working with school districts throughout New York State, Massachusetts, and Connecticut for storage of records management areas, and things of that nature.
So massive amounts of data.
Massive. Also, if you've ever been in colleges, they have these big, systems. They're called high-density mobile systems, and all the libraries have them. You push a button or you spin a wheel, and the whole thing moves on tracks. So I did that for 10 years, and that also brought me into law enforcement industry because law enforcement has a lot of storage needs, everything from evidence to weapons to gear to tactical stuff to your everyday, pass-through and non-pass-through locker, all these different products for storage. Also, they have a massive amount of records, so they need record storage areas. So I worked in both law enforcement and schools for 10 years, working with a lot of different people, in both of those industries. And I find myself working with similar people in the business I'm in now. So it was like a 10-year segue into this position, which I've been at for about 6 or 7 years now. So
Great. And as program director with the New York State Sheriff's Association, give us a sense of I don't know how huge it is, the umbrella that you're going to talk about, but I mean, what is a typical day? Are you coming up with new programs, you and the people you manage? Are you making recommendations to adopt new things? Or are you just sort of honing and refining the programs that already exist? What's the overarching goal? And give us an example, maybe.
Well, I think you touched on a little bit of everything I do. I mean, basically, there was the gentleman that was here prior to me had passed away. He was managing programs that were in existence. Some of these programs have been around since, 2002, Governor Pataki administration, stuff like that. And then, we've also rolled out some new programs. So I manage the programs that have been in existence. And I could go on and name them all, but I mean, there's a lot of requests that happen with these programs on a daily basis. I take emails, I take phone calls all the time. We send mailings out. It's a constant flow of work, that to keep these programs running,
Yeah. So, question about that. So, when you're manning emails and taking phone calls and things, are they? Because this is going to be a question later, but I'll bring it up now. My understanding is that the programs that we're going to talk about today, and a lot of the ones you do, they're designed to have a direct effect on the communities, the people living in your communities, the people that are being served by law enforcement, right? By the sheriffs.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, these programs. They're all public service programs.
Public service programs. So you're getting calls and emails from people. How do I learn more about this? How do I get on the website where I can download get my kits? So my question later, and then we'll come back to the actual programs, but are they by and large very positive responses that it's just people needing help to access the information? Because to me, the programs we're going to talk about, I would think, are a win-win across the board, or are you fielding complaints as well?
Oh, no, there's not too many complaints about these programs. Mm-hmm. Programs are, designed to assist people with all kinds of things, medical things, medical problems. It's also, some of the programs are, designed to help with school districts and managing threat assessments. And then some programs are designed to, be helpful to an officer at a traffic stop, like, for instance, the blue envelope. We're going to talk about that. I mean, and also to assist a person with medical, like medical things that they have wrong with them. For instance, like somebody's diabetic or something, they, fill out these information. God forbid they're, that's another program where they're, so there's all these different programs that really assist people to help them, and that's really what these programs do, is help people in the community. They provide them with a resource or something that helps, that can end. And some of them are life-saving programs,
Well, yeah. So let's get in. Absolutely. And that's why I sort of started the program the way I did, was that this is an incredibly important topic. Right now, there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of work going on. I read books about it. There's a lot out there, but it's never really enough because it's such a huge issue, especially within the what I'll call the invisible disability kind of space, which is where we are at Anderson, is people who otherwise during a traffic stop maybe are going to, an officer might be, expecting just sort of a typical traffic stop. And all of a sudden they start talking, maybe asking for documentation, and the person's, not looking at them, behaving in a way, maybe making some gestures or some vocalizations that aren't making sense to the officer. So that's a good entree into the Blue Envelope program, which I think is fantastic. I've read about it. I know you've gotten some press about it, which is great. Tell us what the program is, because I love its simplicity and also just how thoughtful it is.
Well, I like the word you use, simplicity, because, I tend to ramble on in these kind of things. Like I said to you earlier, I want to keep this simple and to the point. But, basically, the Blue Envelope program, we rolled it out on January, to be specific. We rolled it out on January 16th of this year. And, the program is designed to create safety for both the autistic driver and or passenger and the police officer that's making the traffic stop.
Yes.
I'm sure you've turned on the news or opened the paper and found out that a police officer was shot at a traffic stop by a person, and that person drove off. Well, this is where this program comes in very handy and helpful, because a police officer is very nervous coming up to a car, regardless of what people think. And with all the police being shot, police officers are nervous when they make a traffic. They don't know who's in the car, if they have a weapon, what's going on. So they walk up to the car, and then, somebody doesn't comply with what they're asking them to do. Maybe, for instance, a person that's on the autistic spectrum, and, they start getting wondering why this person is not doing what they're asked and everything. And then they start fidgeting and maybe possibly reach somewhere. Now the officer doesn't know if they're reaching for a weapon or who they are or what. They don't know they have autism, that they're on that spectrum. So it's a very nerve-wracking situation for both parties, I believe, and so this program is designed where, they can provide, the autistic driver can provide a blue envelope that has a copy of their registration, insurance card, and license in it. And when the officer, even if they don't want to answer any of the other officers' questions, all they have to do is provide them with the blue envelope. And the officer will then know that, okay, I have an autistic driver and or passenger in the vehicle. Obviously, if the driver's not complying, they'll figure out it's the driver. There's been situations and, where they pull somebody over and they don't comply and they think they're reaching for a weapon or something. And they pull them out of the car and they put them on the ground, they cuff them, and then later to find out they have autism and that they were on the spectrum. And so there's a lot of training now taking place because this has come, to the surface, and it's become a very widely talked about topic, autism. So maybe where, a long time ago it wasn't talked about, it was shunned or whatever the case may be, just like any other kind of programs or where people have medical disabilities or whatever the case may be. And now things are being talked about in the open, and what can we do to help things, and what can we do to help people? And this is what we did. We rolled out this program.
I think I love it. We're going to take a short break because we're already halfway through. But when we come back, let's get more into the detail of the Blue Envelope program. I want to make sure our listeners know things about, whether there's cost involved, how difficult or easy it is to get a Blue Envelope. And we can give some other examples of when I can see this being very useful, even from just my perspective, knowing so many families and people with autism, even siblings who sometimes are driving their teenage, maybe brother or sister around in a car, which adds, I think, to that heightened sense of stress can add to that. So we're going to be right back. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to touch on the Yellow Dot program, which I also thought was really cool. Want to learn more about that. James Bowers, Program Director with the New York State Sheriff's Association. Thank you for being on 1 in 36. We will be right back.
You're welcome, Eliza. Thank you.
If I could be you.
And you could be me.
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes. If you're talking, they will hear you.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy. So we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. Not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So talk, they hear you. You can do it if you try.
At Wheelchairs for Warriors, serving America's heroes is our mission. With your support, we serve veterans and first responders injured in the line of duty across the United States of America, providing them custom-fit, complex rehab mobility solutions to ensure they rejoin their lives at the highest level of independent mobility and function possible. Join the mission at wheelchairsforwarriors.org.
And now, 1 in 36 continues on 100.7 WHUD. This is a weekly community affairs program presented by the Anderson Center for Autism.
Welcome back to 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and with me today is James Bowers, who is the program director for the New York State Sheriff's Association. And James, as one, I know what you're saying about being able to ramble on about things. I would not say you ramble. I think that you and I share a passion for what we do. And so we could talk about it for a while because we get excited the more we talk about kind of, I think, both having a recognition and appreciation for simple solutions that have potentially very significant impact. And So as you were describing the Blue Envelope program, which you rolled out on January 16th, 2025, it is simple. It's literally giving people access to getting a blue envelope, mailed to them? Is there a website that they go to get one, or stop by a local police station? How do they get an envelope?
Well, they can do it a number of ways. They can go to their local county sheriff's office. They can also go on the Sheriff's Association website, or just Google New York State Sheriff's Association. And on the website, on the Sheriff's Association website, there is a programs tab, public safety programs, and all of our programs are under there. They can click on the Blue Envelope program. It will tell them to go to their local county sheriff's office. But then they contact them, and they can go right down and pick up as many envelopes as they need.
I love all of that. I love that you get more than one. I love that you can go online if you don't want to walk into an office to pick one up. The other thing that I really like about it is that for anybody who is also maybe struggles with organization, because that's another thing I would think heightens a typical traffic stop in terms of tension and kind of heightened concern on the part of the officer. You might look like you're reaching for potentially a weapon, especially if maybe there's not a lot of compliance or not a lot of vocalization happening. And all of a sudden what you're really doing is you're reaching for the fact that you can't remember where you put your license, your registration. Having an envelope, especially a colored envelope, helps you stay organized and helps you in these situations where you just have to hand one thing to an officer. I think I mentioned before the break, there are quite a number of people who could be driving with an autistic person in the car. And even if that person isn't the driver, you mentioned before, it could be the passenger. There's this thing that's extremely scary for a lot of families called elopement, where sometimes people on the autism spectrum will sort of flee from a scary or stressful situation. And so let's say you get pulled over while you're maybe the parent or the caregiver or a babysitter or an older sibling dealing with the officer. All of a sudden, an officer sees a child or a young adult opening their passenger door and running. That I would think is going to heighten the awareness of that officer and maybe lead to a really unfortunate situation. Having that blue envelope already in the mix maybe gives that pause of something else is happening here. So I just wanted to give some additional examples because I think it's a really great program. What has the community response been since January to you about the Blue Envelope program?
Well, Liza, it's been overwhelming, to be honest with you. There's been a large number of requests. Not only the sheriff's office, we sent out already about 20,000 envelopes throughout the state.
Wow.
And we have another 20,000 here in the office. So, I would imagine at some point it would flatten out a little bit, but the initial rollout, we sent them to all the sheriff's office in the whole state. And then what happened is other agencies are now requesting them. So police departments, village, town, and city police, and the sheriff's offices are getting a hold of us and telling us that we have other agencies in our county that would like to participate in this. And rolling this out, we actually met with the Center for Autism because we wanted to make sure that we were doing things correctly and that we understood autism. And I personally met with one of the senior trainers right here in Albany at the Center for Autism for You Albany, and she's a very nice person, and she really educated me on autism. And so they've helped us. The blue envelope itself, it has writing on it. On the front of it, it says for the driver, if you're stopped by the police officer, and it has 7 or 8 bullets of information of things you can do if you're the driver. On the back of the envelope, it has attention police officer, the drivers on the autism spectrum. These are some things you can look for. Yes. And like you said, there is some people that flee. Fleeing is one thing, and I've talked to the state police about this, and I was told a story where they were doing a mock stop situation for autistic drivers, state police, and they said the guy just took off, and it was a mock stop because he got nervous or he got anxiety and like you said, fleeing is one of the things. So yeah.
I love that you have the writing on both sides of the envelope. I've interviewed many guests recently an author who co-wrote a really great book about this very topic. And one of the things, his whole background is in working directly as a direct support professional and then more of an executive, but always directly with individuals with autism and their families. And he gave example after example after example of why it is so important and really incumbent, not just on the part of the professionals, the first responders, the police, the, fire department, the, EMTs, to be trained that they may not have all the information when they're coming up onto a scene, right? And to try to have something like this, but also incumbent on the part of the caregiver, the parent, the school districts to be very clear to teach from a young age children on the autism spectrum how to appropriately respond when, for example, pulled over or speaking, being asked questions by, somebody in uniform, because it's really both. So I love that you do that again so simply on one side of the envelope and on the other side of the envelope. It really reinforces that point. We have a few more minutes. I'd love to shift over to the Yellow Dot program just because I was reading a little bit about that. And that I think has a little bit more of a medical component, but can be very helpful in kind of, I think it's called the golden hour, which I've never heard that phrase before, but that, I guess, initial time when you're coming on the scene of a potentially serious accident.
Yes, the Yellow Dot program is exactly that, Eliza. It's a program that also was, came out a long time ago, and I took it over and managing it when I came on board. But the Yellow Dot program is a program to assist people during the golden hour. And that's just the immediate time after a crash, where first responders can provide life-saving measures and save some lives. And this program can save a life. I mean, the way it works is you have a decal, a little yellow dot that you stick on the driver's side rear window. And in addition, you have a card, a yellow heavy stock card that's a trifold card that has, you can put all your medical information, your medical contacts, all that kind of stuff. So, for instance, if somebody was diabetic and they went into like a diabetic home while driving and passed out or something and hit something and they were unconscious and the first responder came to the scene and they saw the yellow dot, then they would know to go into the glove box and find out, hey, this person's diabetic, we need to give them a shot or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And one of the big components that we haven't talked about yet, and I just mentioned briefly, is very important, is I continuously, educate people on these programs. And also, we have to do awareness campaigns constantly. So, just because you have a program out there, it doesn't mean that all the first responders know about it. And one of my goals is to increase the awareness of these programs annually by sending flyers to the sheriffs, and they push them out to their first responder networks and ask them to hang them in their locker rooms, hang them in their break rooms, so that when the road patrol is out there, if they do see a blue envelope or they see a yellow dot, that they'll know what these programs are for, so that they have the awareness. Because law enforcement, people changing jobs constantly,
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. And just from my marketing background here at Anderson, I know how important repeat messaging is in terms of, like you said, turnover and also just front of mind. I've had really fascinating conversations with people who are first responders and also people who train first responders, and about sort of we're asking folks who have been so strictly and strong and professionally trained to react in seconds to sometimes scenes where there's a million things going on all at once. And we're asking them to find another couple seconds to make room for maybe there's something else going on here that I can't see. So it's really an intriguing kind of development, I think, in the world of first response. And I appreciate it. I know the families at Anderson appreciate it tremendously. I know the whole community really appreciates it. And so if we can use this just one little additional podcast interview to help you with your campaign, we want you to do that, and we will do the same and hope that more hear about this. Very simple to get to. We have to finish up here, but I would say what you said before, you can just Google New York State Sheriff's Association. You can go on their website. It's in the news. So if you just Google blue envelope or yellow dot, you'll also find it there, and you'll find links to websites where you can get your kits. And I hope that others listening will just continue to push this forward. These are the things that really make a big difference. So James, thank you.
You're welcome, Eliza. Thank you very much. And, I just want to mention one more thing that made me squeeze in, and that is, the Yellow Dot program's been around longer than the Blue Envelope. And, when we did our press conference here during the rollout, we had a woman here who said, oh, yeah, I'm so happy that this Blue Envelope program came out. But prior to this, I used to use the Yellow Dot program to mention that I had a son that was autistic.
Yeah.
People were using the Yellow Dot program for saying that they had somebody with autism in the vehicle. So
absolutely. And that goes to show the need for resources. Exactly these, that people are adapting resources to meet their own needs, but then you're responding with something that's specifically for that population. And that also goes a long way in terms of awareness and understanding. And keep in mind, there's also a number of people who have autism and also have other medical conditions. Seizure disorder, for example, is very, very common in the autistic population, which those are two things that first responders would probably very much want to know, because, similar to the diabetic situation, the example that you gave, that isn't immediately obvious either, when you're first coming upon somebody who's had an accident. So I just want to thank you, James, and thank your whole team for continuing these programs and coming up with new ones, and for your time today to talk about it. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Eliza, and thank you for spreading the word. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's what we do. This is 1 in 36, the weekly talk show on topics related to autism spectrum disorder. I'm your host, Eliza Bozensky, and remember, Anderson cares.
You've been listening to 1 in 36, a weekly presentation from Anderson Center for Autism, celebrating their centennial in 2024. Join them for another edition of the show next weekend.